Thank you, Emilio, for being with us today. We're going to speak a little bit about the Mexican labor reform. And the USMCA introduces a labor value content rules to the rules of origin that requires 40% of passenger vehicles and 45% of pickup cargo vehicles to be made by workers who earn a wage of at least $16 per hour. How will regional labor value content changes proposed in the USMCA affect North American manufacturers?
I think overall the change is going to be positive. Remember that all the discussion about the new free trade agreement between Mexico, the US, and Canada had to do with the topic of deficits. And I think this was a well-designed strategy proposed by the US and Mexico, and then adopted by Canada, to use this chapter to keep at least the trade balance between the three countries on this sector as it is today. But what it will do is it will bring opportunities to bring products from other parts of the world and localize that supply chain either in Mexico, the US, and Canada. I think where it would go, it will depend on the skills, the technology, the natural resources, etc., used by each of them.
Okay. Additionally, on April 11, 2009, the Mexico's Chamber of Deputies approved a reform to the federal labor law to be implemented gradually over the next 4 years. The bill overhauls the country's current union structure and meets Mexico's labor requirements under Chapter 23 and Annex 23A of the USMCA. Will the Mexican labor reform facilitate or challenge the implementation of USMCA labor value content rules?
Yeah, I think first of all, the implementation of the labor law, it's a must for full implementation of the new trade agreement. This is something that has been debated with Mexico for a long time. Actually, the reform comes from 2016. It's just that we passed the implementing bill, let me say, of this new reform, which was mandatory for USMCA to go to the next steps. I think the new labor law in Mexico, it's a modern law. It's much more similar to laws of Europe, of the US. So I think this is a step that had to be taken by Mexico. I think the challenge is going to be the transition period. Okay, how do we learn to live with this new law? What are the changes and what that does to the day-to-day operations? But overall, no doubt about it, it's going to motivate for a more productive environment and for better working conditions for workers.
Okay, great. All signs point to a ratified USMCA. There are mixed economic reviews concerning possible scenarios of GDP growth, customer price index, and trade deficit shifts. Outside of all of these economic scenarios, what is necessary for a win-win-win scenario?
Yes, I think the most important change that we have been seeing is not related to the trade rules, is related to the trends of consumption. And what that means is that the consumer today wants first-class quality products. They want them quickly into their market. So I think what this has been doing is making regional competitiveness the most important thing for companies to grow and for consumers to have this type of products. I think the win-win-win situation for this region is that we can think about a collective competitiveness of the region to make sure that we bring these products to the market in the price and with the quality and speed that the customers expect.
Great. What can companies start doing today to prepare themselves?
What I've been seeing by talking to a lot of companies is that the pieces of the puzzle are there. Most companies know what have to be done. But I think what we see is a lack of an implementation strategy, of an integrated implementation strategy, because we're talking about changes in trade rules, we're talking about different scenarios of trade and consumption, we're talking about Industry 4.0 and what that does to companies, changes on the labor law. So how do you put all this on one specific plan that you can follow up and execute on? I think this is the biggest challenge for companies, but I think it's doable.